I have brought peace for our times. I think it's time for another fountain pen shootout. In principio erat verbum, et verbum apud Deum, et Deus erat verbus. No, verbum. Conjugate, Brown. Anyway, sorry. In the beginning was the Momento Zero, and of course then we got the Furore. This is the Furore. And then we got the Furore Grande. And then we got the Pilot Metropolitan there as a size comparison. None of these are small pens. I think the regular Furore is already a nice size. Definitely a nice girth. And the Grande just made everything a bit bigger. So this is just there as a size comparison. We'll get rid of that. What is interesting? What's the difference between these two pens? Well, obviously the size. That goes without saying. Interestingly enough, they're the same material. It's the same finish, but it's a bit more turquoise on the Grande than on the regular Furore. And look how beautiful this is. This truly is one of my favorite pen materials. The Chatoyance is out of this world. And there are some differences between the pens. Both of these happen to have a gold nib, because both are upgraded, but the standard version would be with a steel nib. And I've also reviewed this with a steel nib, so you can check that out if you want to. The nib used to be Bock and then turned into Jovo, although this has an older gold Leonardo Bock nib on it, so beware that when you interpret the writing sample. The biggest difference beyond the obvious one of the size is, in my mind, that the Grande is a piston filler and the regular Furore is a cartridge converter filled pen. The second difference that matters in my mind is the clip is different. The newer Leonardos have this thinner, more vintage looking clip. They both have the little wheel, which is cute. And the final difference that really stands out in my mind is the cap lip. You see on the Furore it's straight, and in the Furore Grande, as well as the new Momento Zero Grandes, and maybe also the new Momento Zeros. I haven't seen those yet. And I guess maybe also the new Furores. In any case, the cap lip is now tapered, which in my mind makes for a sleeker design, which I quite like. Okay, so if we look under the hood, there isn't much to show you on the Furore Grande, but with the regular Furore there are one or two things. So as you can see, the section shape is really quite similar between the two pens, right, except that the Grande has this metal ring at the end and the Furore does not, but a very similar section shape. And if you're like me, you have a look at this section, you think that looks not very comfortable. The strange thing is, I know, that's how I felt too, but it turns out to be, to me, very comfortable. And most people I've given these pens to use say, yeah, that is actually really comfortable. Now, what we were talking about is, by the way, this one has ABS plastic as a feed. That's the old gold nib, and the newer gold nibs have ebonite feeds, so that is another big difference. But what I really want to show you was the way this is built. So here you have a blind cap that comes off. This is the regular Furore. You can operate this as a piston, dip the pen in ink as a piston under the blind cap, but in reality it is a converter, and it's not captive. We've had that discussion at some point, should we call it captive converter or not. It's not captive, it comes out and it screws in, which makes it really quite reliable, as you can, oh my god. Sorry about that. That was probably the only ink in it, so let's hope we can do a writing sample. In any case, that's pretty much all I had to tell you, really. So let's look at them side by side. There is a little bit of bleed through on this page, but I would rather use both sides of the paper and not waste the paper, if you don't mind. So let's look at this one first. I like this one posted. For me, the size of my hands, I like this one posted. So here we have the Leonardo Furore. The ink is Waterman ... inspired blue. It's the Waterman turquoise. That was a question mark because I always forget their names. It used to be South Sea blue, but I think it's now inspired blue. This is a 14K stub, which is a very pleasant nib, I must say. and it's very smooth. I'm writing on the back of the notebook underneath the paper, which always creates quite a bit of noise and makes it sound like it's a very feedbacky nib. But it turns out that it's not really. It's actually very smooth if you really use it. So please bear that in mind if you're evaluating this. It's quite wet. And it wrote out of the box, nice stub, nice line variation. I really quite like this pen. Then we have the Furore Grande, now with a 14K nib that I put on it. It is an official Leonardo nib, much bigger when posted. Right, this one I kind of like to use unposted. I find that more than comfortable. This is a 14K broad nib, rhodium trim. So here we have the Leonardo Furore Grande. This is the 14K broad, which, just due to the shape of the tipping, also is a little bit of a stub, but it's not marketed as a stub, it's marketed as a broad, and it has less line variation than the actual stub does. I'm just trying to give you as detailed an overview as I can of the oops, I just flew off the paper, did you see that? What an amateur. I've never done this before. It's the first time I use a fountain pen. So I'm going to give you a detailed overview of the way the pen's write. You can also see that it's a little less saturated. See, the Grande nib versus this nib, a little drier. Again, both are Bock nibs. This is pre-change, because Leonardo now uses JoWo nibs, as I understand the story. So this is still the old Bock. If you want to see the JoWo steel nib, please look up the review of the Grande, where I have a fine steel nib on that pen. The line variation here, well, it's there, right? It is there. Wetness, as I said, it's a little drier than the stub. So which of the two do I prefer? Well, notice that it's the same finish, but one is a bit bluer than the other, which is interesting. They're both wonderful acrylics in my mind. I absolutely love this finish. It's so sparkling, and it really, in my mind, it's called Smeraldo, right? Emerald. This in my mind is a bit more emerald than this, but I'm not very acquainted with gemstones, so maybe there are bluer emeralds. I don't know, people. I don't know these things. I'm a psychologist, not a gemologist. So I find them absolutely gorgeous, both of them. I like using both of them. Both have very different nibs that are both very nice and pleasant to write with. I prefer bigger pens. It's a preference, so naturally I would say, well, I like the Furore, but the Grande, but the regular Furore also is already really quite a comfortable pen. Again, for me, especially when posted, just very comfortable, very pleasant. So I find it hard to pick. It's nice to have the piston, but then it's easier to clean the cartridge converter, so I really don't know if I would pick it on the basis of a filling system. The one thing I would say is it's easier with the cartridge converter to figure out how much ink you have left. There is no ink window, and in this model no translucency or transparency, so you have no idea how much ink you have left with this particular pen. So from that perspective, a pragmatic on-the-road perspective, I might prefer this. Having said that, I really love them both, and I don't know if I can pick one over the other, because they're similar, yet different. Similar yet different. Just like people. So I hope this was useful, and I'll gladly see you later. Bye-bye.